The will was read on a hot May afternoon in Abilene, Texas, and by the time the lawyer finished, Lucas Bridges was sure his late uncle had finally gone crazy. The man had left Lucas's ranch, a small fortune in gold certificates, and a pile of impossible rules. Lucas was to raise one pig entirely on his own for 9 months without it dying, and then live 6 months with a wife without filing a single complaint. One dead pig, one complaint, and the entire inheritance would vanish like smoke. Lucas stared at the brass pendulum clock on the lawyer's shelf. Every tick seemed to mock him. He was 35 with calloused hands, a bad temper, and no patience for nonsense. Raising a pig like it was a Sunday guest, and a wife on top of that, it sounded like punishment. Rules is rules, the lawyer said behind his spectacles. Your uncle wanted proof that discipline could tame a man's fire. You got 9 months to show him he wasn't wrong. Lucas spat into the spittoon. Fine, I'll do it, but if that hog outsmarts me, you'll hear the echo all the way to Dallas. Quote, that evening he saddled his mare and rode out toward his inheritance, a 2-room cabin with a leaning chimney, a barn the color of weathered silver, and 40 acres of scrub grass rolling gentle beneath a big Texas ski. It wasn't much, but it was 40 acres more than he'd had yesterday. The next morning he hitched his wagon and rode into town. His feed and supplies sat on Cedar Street, smelling of grain and tobacco. The owner, Jeremy Cobb, leaned on the counter. Need supplies? Need a pig? Lucas said, a good one. Got to last 9 months. Jeremy raised an eyebrow. Most folks fatten and butcher at 6. Ain't most folks. They walked out back to a muddy pen where a dozen piglets rooted noisily. One caught Lucas's eye, a spotted gilt with bright eyes and steady feet. That one, he said. She's Hampshire-Yorkshire mix. Jeremy said hardy stock. Good. I need her tougher than me. Lucas counted out $12 and hauled her home in a rattling wagon, the pig squealing the whole way. He built Herpin tight and proper. 20 by 30 oak rails sunk deep, a lean-to shelter in the corner. He even rigged a water system from the windmill because the lawyer's words about no hired hands rang like a warning bell in his head. When he finished, he leaned on the rail, watching the pig sniff and explore. Well, girl, he said, looks like we're stuck together. The first week passed smooth. Lucas fed her at sunrise, cleaned the pan before the day's heat, and kept the water fresh. He painted buckets in colors, red for feed, blue for water, green for slop, and found the rhythm of it calming. But on the third day, when the pig knocked her trough over, something in him sparked hot. His hand tightened around the hammer he'd been using. Old habits told him to curse, to kick, to let the fire out. Instead, he walked to the barn and read the sign he'd nailed to the door the first day. 3 breaths before action. He stood there breathing slow, 1 in, 1 out, 2, 3. The anger slipped away like smoke on wind. He went back, fixed the trough properly, and not a single curse left his mouth. By the end of September, both man and pig had settled into routine. She came when he called, knew feeding time by the sun, and kept herself surprisingly clean. Lucas wrote notes in a grease-stained ledger each evening. September 15th, clear, warm. Pig ate 3 lb feed, no sickness. September 16th, light rain. Added straw, pig stayed dry. For the first time in years, he felt steady. No trouble, no temper. No need to prove anything. But October had a way of testing men. 3 days of rain came hard and cold, turning county roads to soup and washing out Mill Creek Bridge. Lucas woke on October 8th with feed for 2 days and no way to reach town. He eyed his pantry. Cornmeal, oats, dried beans, not pig feed, but it would have to do. He boiled a mash, carried it to the pen, and watched her eat every bit. Then came the next hit. Overnight, a waterline froze and burst, flooding the pen, till the pig stood miserable and shivering on her platform. Lucas felt the old rage flare again. 9 months of work and 1 busted pipe could ruin everything, but he stopped himself, breathing slow before action. Then he got to work. He shut off the valve, dug out the broken line, and fixed it proper this time, installing a barrel system that wouldn't freeze again. It took all day, but by sundown the pig was dry, fed, and content. She looked at him with a calm that made him grin. We're getting smarter, you and me, he said. But the land wasn't done testing him yet. 2 weeks later, fever hit. Lucas woke sweating, head spinning, throat raw. The pig still needed feeding, so he stumbled outside, did what he could, and collapsed back onto his bed, still in his boots. For 2 days he drifted in and out, hearing the pig cry from her pen. On the 3rd morning, the silence scared him more than the fever. He crawled outside to find her lying in the shelter, breathing shallow and fast. He hitched the wagon, somehow got her loaded and rattled 12 miles to town. By the time he raked Manuel Coe's veterinary office, both man and animal were half dead. "You both got the same thing," Manuel said. "Some kind of fever, but she'll make it if you keep her warm and fed." Lucas followed every instruction. Back home, he moved her pen closer to the cabin, rigged a cot by the kitchen window, and built a small shelter he could tend without walking far. For a week, he fed her small portions, changed straw, and noted every sign of recovery in his log. October 27th. Pig ate half portion, breathing better, my fever down some. October 28th. Pig finished full feed, walked around pen. Good sign. By November, she was strong again, and so was he. And when he watched her trot around that pen in the frost light, he realized the truth. He wasn't just raising a pig anymore. He was learning how to raise himself. The pig had survived the winter, fat and strong, and Lucas felt something shift inside him. The temper that once ruled his hands had turned quiet. The ranch, once a lonely piece of dirt, now felt alive. But when spring came, the lawyer's clock ticked toward the second test. 6 months of marriage and not a single formal complaint. Finding a wife, it turned out, was harder than raising livestock. Lucas cleaned himself up for the first time in months. He trimmed his beard, washed the farm smell off his clothes, and rode into Abilene. His first stop was Hers Feed and Supply because Jeremy Cobb knew everyone's business. "You heard about my uncle's will," Lucas said. "Whole town's heard." Jeremy chuckled. "Word is you passed the pig part. Now you just need a woman brave enough to live with you." Lucas smirked. "You know any?" Jeremy scratched his chin. "There's Florence Estee, school teacher, smart as a whip, but wants her man polished daily. Or Emily Guzman, widow, runs a boarding house on Elm Street. Practical woman, knows work." Lucas nodded. "Emily. Then I ain't a polished man." The Guzman house stood neat and proud. Lace curtains in the windows and the smell of fresh bread in the porch. Emily met him at the door. A woman of 32 with brown hair pinned neat, eyes steady, and hands that had seen work. "I heard about you, Mr. Bridges," she said. "And about your uncle's will. Come in. We'll talk." Quote, they sat in her tidy parlor over coffee that tasted strong and sure. "I run this place myself," Emily said. "I value peace and order. If we marry, I'll need assurance you won't bring chaos to me home." Lucas nodded. "The will says, I've got to live with a wife 6 months without filing a complaint. Seems to me a man filing complaints isn't much of a husband anyway. And when you inherit your ranch," she asked, "then we see if we suit each other long term. If not, we part friendly." Emily studied him quiet for a moment. "Marriage is a partnership, even if temporary. I won't be rushed into intimacy, Mr. Bridges. We'll do this properly with respect." "That suits me fine," Lucas said, standing to leave. "I'll do my best by you." 2 weeks later, the small-town church bell rang for their wedding. Lucas wore a borrowed suit. Emily a blue dress she'd sewn herself. The minister spoke plain words about patience and duty, and when Lucas looked at Emily's eyes as he said, "Edo," something in him settled deeper than any promise he'd made before. Their first weeks together went easy enough. Emily moved to the ranch, organized the cabin, cleaned corners Lucas hadn't known existed, and turned the place from a bachelor's den into a home. She cooked well, kept the books balanced, and met every day with calm determination. Lucas found himself admiring her more than he'd expected. She wasn't delicate or demanding, just steady, like the kind of quiet fire that burns through a long winter. One evening, as they walked the fence line, Emily said, "You've done good with this land. You might plant fruit trees on that south slope. Give shade for the pig pen and a little extra income later." "Trees take years," Lucas said. She smiled. "Some things worth waiting for." Their relationship deepened in small moments. The way Shepard his coffee before he asked, or how he fixed the squeaky cabinet without being told. Each act built a rhythm between them, a pattern of respect that softened the hard edges of their arrangement. But late one night, as the wind whispered against the windows, Emily stood by the lamp, her eyes unreadable. "Lucas," she said softly, "I think it's time we stop living like strangers." He stood, setting down his book. "You sure?" Quote. She nodded, a faint tremor in her voice. "I want to be your wife in every way. But I need you to understand something. I don't give myself lightly. Once I trust a man, there's no turning back." Lucas stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His voice was low, steady. "Once I use my tongue on you, there's no escape." She trembled, but didn't step away. "Then don't let me escape." That night, under the soft light of Acrosine lamp, they crossed the line between arrangement and devotion. It wasn't wild passion, but something quieter, more human. A promise sealed by touch, by breath, by two people learning what it meant to surrender without losing themselves. Days turned to weeks. The ranch ran smooth, the pig healthy, and Emily laughed more often now. Lucas thought maybe this test would be easier than the first. Then April came, bringing storms, not from the sky, but from inside their small house. Emily began feeling sick each morning. She grew pale, tired, and irritable. Lucas fetched the doctor, who confirmed what neither had expected so soon. She was with child. The news hit Lucas like a hammer. He wasn't afraid of fatherhood, just unprepared. But Emily's sickness grew worse. The smell of the pig, the sweat from Lucas's shirt, even the soap he used, all of it turned her stomach. She'd cry without reason, then apologize, then cry again. The woman who'd once run a boarding house like clockwork now struggled to manage her own emotions. "I can't stand the smell of that pen," she said one morning, tears streaking her cheeks. "It's everywhere. On your clothes, on your hands, in this house. I've moved it as far as I can," Lucas said gently. "But the wind don't listen to either of us." Her mood swung like a door in a storm. One moment tender, the next angry, frightened, or withdrawn. Lucas tried to stay calm, to remember the lessons he'd learned from the pig. Patience, planning, and control. But sometimes when she flung sharp words at him, the old fire threatened to rise. Money became another storm. With a baby coming, Emily began worrying over every cent. She'd question his smallest purchases, adding and subtracting on scraps of paper late into the night. "This thread was 12 cents, she said one evening. "It's 10 at Peterson's." "Oosens ain't worth a cross-town ride," Lucas said. 2 cents here, 5 cents there. "It adds up," she snapped. He wanted to argue, but bit his tongue instead. By May, tensions were thick as summer heat. Then one morning, Lucas woke to water pooling across the kitchen floor. A pipe had burst in the night. Emily stood frozen, pale and weeping. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. Lucas saw the half-written complaint letter sitting on the table. One signature, and he'd lose it all. His temper sparked, but he walked to the barn, stared at his old sign, and counted. 1 breath, 2, 3. When Heck came back, he said only, "Go sit outside, Emily. I'll handle it." Heck cleaned, repaired, dried, and mopped till sunset. By nightfall, the damage was fixed. Emily returned, guilt written across her face. "I almost filed it," she said quietly. "The letter. But then I saw you calm, steady, working without anger. You've changed, Lucas, maybe," he said. "Or maybe I'm just finally learning what my uncle meant by discipline." That night they sat on the porch, the sound of frogs rising from the creek, the air cooler and kind. For the first time in weeks, Emily smiled softly. "Maybe this test ain't about complaints," she said. "Maybe it's about love that lasts through them." Lucas reached for her hand. "Then let's keep passing it." The lawyer's clock in Abilene kept ticking, marking 3 months of marriage down. 3 more, Togo. Summer in Abilene came hard that year. The heat baked the land, turned dust to powder, and made tempers thin. Lucas worked sunrise to dusk to keep the ranch alive, but every swing of the hammer and every pull of the water pump reminded him how heavy the days had grown. Emily's belly had rounded by June, the baby due in October, and her sickness had changed into a weariness that never seemed to leave. The smell of cooking made her ill, so Lucas took over the kitchen. He burned half his meals at first, but he learned oatcakes in the morning, beans and cornbread at night, simple and quiet food. Still, Emily fretted. "We're running out of money," she said one afternoon, fanning herself on the porch. "How are we going to afford the doctor or the baby things?" Lucas wiped sweat from his brow. "We'll manage. The pig sells in fall. That'll cover what we need. But what if she dies before then? What if something happens?" Her voice cracked. "You don't understand, Lucas. You can fix fences, but you can't fix this fear." He didn't answer right away. There were things a man couldn't fix, only stand beside. So he sat on the porch step, rested his hand over hers, and said, "Then I'll fear it with you." For a time, that was enough. July brought storms, not of rain, but words. The cabin walls closed in with heat, and small annoyances grew large. Emily left clothes scattered. Lucas tracked dust across her clean floors. Every sound seemed too loud, every sigh too heavy. "Can you be quieter when you come in?" She snapped one afternoon. "You stomp like thunder." "Just shaking the dirt off," he said. "We'll shake it outside next time." He started to argue, but bit his tongue. The pig, fat and healthy, grunted from her pen beyond the barn, a reminder of how far he'd come from Thaman, who used to throw tools when angry. Still, it was getting harder to stay patient. Then one August night, everything cracked. Lucas came in late from mending fences to find Emily crying at the table. "I can't take this anymore," she said. "The heat, the smell, the worry. I gave up my business, my peace, everything. And now I'm trapped." Lucas's chest burned. "Trapped? You think I wanted this test? I'm working every hour to keep us afloat. I didn't ask you to marry me," she cried. "You needed a wife to win your uncle's game. I was just convenient." The words cut deep, sharper than any blade. He could have shouted back, slammed a door, broken something just to let the fire out. But instead he turned away, walked to the barn, and read the old sign again. 3 breaths before action. He counted slow, each breath like lifting a weight off his shoulders. When he went back, Emily had moved the complaint letter into the drawer again. "I won't file it," she said through tears. "But I came close tonight." He nodded, sitting across from her. "We'll figure this out, we always do." They spent the next morning talking. Not fighting, just talking. Emily confessed her fears. Lucas admitted his exhaustion. Together they made rules like they'd done 4-inch work. Simple, steady, meant to hold through storms. Rule 1. Breakfast ready before dawn so Emily could eat before sickness set in. Rule 2. A weekly budget meeting. No blame, just numbers. Rule 3. The 48-hour rule. If anger hit, they'd wait 2 days before saying anything sharp. It wasn't romantic, but it worked. By September, the house ran smooth again. Lucas cooked dearly. Emily rested more, and the air between them softened. Their evenings were quiet, rocking chairs on the porch, fireflies glowing over the pasture. Sometimes she'd rest her head on his shoulder and whisper, "Thank you for not giving up on me." He'd smile, "You taught me not to." Then October came, and with it, labor pains. Emily's water broke before dawn on the 3rd. Lucas moved like a man on rails, boiling water, fetching clean linens, sending word to Dr. Manuel Cumbered 12 hours later. In the small bedroom of that 2-room cabin, their son came crying into the world. Emily wept and laughed at once. "He's perfect," she whispered. Lucas looked at her and the newborn boy and felt something shift in his bones. All the lessons from the will, the patience, the temper, the planning, they'd led to this moment. The inheritance didn't matter anymore. This was what it had all been for. They named him Byron. 2 weeks later, Lucas rode into town to meet Douglas Green again. The brass clock still ticked on the lawyer's shelf. The same sound that had started it all. "The pig's healthy?" Douglas asked. "Healthy and sold for $26, Lucas said, handing over the papers. "And the marriage?" Quote, 6 months and 2 weeks. No complaints filed. Douglas smiled faintly. "Then congratulations. The ranch and funds are now fully yours. Your uncle would have been proud," he said. "A man who masters his temper can master anything." Lucas rode home that day with the deed in his coat pocket, but more peace in his heart than he'd ever known. The ranch wasn't just his bylaw. It was his by labor, patience, and love. Through winter, he improved everything. He dug a new well near the house, built Emily a washroom with aerial copper tub, and reinforced the barn to hold more livestock. Emily, now strong again, managed the home with her usual quiet efficiency. By spring, she was expecting another child. When their second boy, Rocky, was born the next January, the cabin echoed with baby cries and laughter. The land thrived, the animals fattened, and the systems Lucas once built to survive had become the foundation of a life worth living. 3 years later, a letter came from Douglas Green. One last surprise from his uncle's will. Inside was a deed to another 160 acres adjoining his land. The note read, "You've passed every test. The rest is up to you." Lucas folded the paper and went outside. Emily was hanging laundry while Byron and Rocky played in the dirt. The sun was dropping gold across their pasture and the windmill creaked its steady rhythm. "More land?" Emily asked, smiling. "More work?" Lucas said, "But worth it." That evening, after the boys were asleep, they sat together on the porch swing. The air smelled of sage and warm earth. Lucas brushed her hair back, voice low and teasing. "Once I use my tongue on you, there's no escape." Emily laughed softly, leaning into him. "Is that so, Mr. Bridges?" "That's so, Mrs. Bridges." She kissed him slow. The kind of kiss built from years of forgiveness, patience, and love. The brass clock from the lawyer's office now sat on their mantel, still ticking, still counting. But it wasn't marking a test anymore. It was keeping time for a life they'd built together. One breath, one day, one act of patience at a time. Beyond the porch, their land stretched wide under the stars. 200 acres of proof that the strongest kind of love isn't born in fire. It's built in steady hands, quiet words, and the will to never walk